I never thought a wedding invitation would break me. But here I was, standing in my kitchen with trembling hands, staring at the cream-colored envelope with gold-embossed letters that read, "Miles Cole and Victoria Hayes cordially invite you to celebrate their union." My vision blurred for a second. I blinked hard, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less painful. They didn't. This was real. This was happening. 3 years. We'd been together for 3 entire years, hidden away like some shameful secret. No one knew. Not our friends. Definitely not our families. Miles always had a reason. His career was taking off. His parents wouldn't understand. The timing wasn't right, and like a fool, I believed him every single time. I convinced myself that love meant patience, that eventually we'd step into the light together. I told myself that what we had in those stolen moments was enough. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. I set the invitation down on the counter and gripped the edge of the marble surface, trying to steady myself. My phone buzzed. Another text from him. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I've been thinking about you all day." A wave of nausea rolled through me. 2 months. It had been 2 months since Miles married her, and he was still texting me like nothing had changed. Like he hadn't stood in front of 100 people and promised forever to someone else while I sat at home, pretending I was fine. The worst part? I almost went along with it. When he first told me about the engagement, he made it sound temporary. "George, listen to me. This is just what my parents want. It's arranged, it's formal, it doesn't mean anything. Once things settle down, once I secure the promotion, we can figure us out properly." I wanted to believe him so badly that I ignored every red flag waving in my face. I ignored the fact that he never once fought for us. I ignored the fact that I was always the one making sacrifices. But something shifted 2 days ago. I went to a work event, one of those networking mixers I usually avoid. I was nursing a drink in the corner when someone approached me. Tall, dark-haired, with kind eyes that actually saw me. His name was Nolan Reed. We started talking, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. He didn't play games. He didn't hide. When he mentioned he was single, he said it with confidence, not shame. We exchanged numbers. And the next day he asked me to coffee. Coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into a long walk through the park where we talked about everything. Our families, our dreams, the things that scared us. Nolan didn't flinch when I mentioned I'd recently gotten out of something complicated. He just listened. And yesterday, sitting across from me at a small Italian restaurant, he looked me straight in the eye and said something that knocked the air out of my lungs. "George, I don't believe in wasting time. I like you. I want to build something real with you. Marry me. No secrets, no hiding, no waiting for the right moment. Just us." I didn't answer right away. It felt too fast, too sudden. But then this morning, Miles texted me again. "I need to see you tonight. Please. I miss you so much." And something inside me snapped. I called Nolan. My hands were shaking, my voice unsteady, but I said the word that changed everything. Yes. Miles had no idea. He was still living in his fantasy world, where I'd wait forever, where I'd accept whatever scraps of affection he threw my way. He didn't know that I'd found someone who wanted me in the daylight, not just in the dark. He didn't know that I was done being a secret. Tonight I was going to see him one last time, not because I owed him anything, but because I needed closure. I needed to look him in the eye and tell him that I was choosing myself. I glanced at the clock. 6:47 p.m. He'd asked me to come over at 7. I walked to my bedroom and stood in front of the mirror studying my reflection. My eyes looked different somehow. Stronger. There was a determination there that hadn't existed before. I slipped on the silver ring Nolan had given me yesterday. It was simple, understated, but it felt like armor. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and anticipation. The drive to Miles's apartment felt longer than usual, every red light stretching into eternity. He still kept his old place even after marrying Victoria, claimed he needed somewhere to work late without disturbing her. I knew the truth. He kept it so we'd have somewhere to meet. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw his car already there. The lights were on in his second-floor window. For a moment I almost turned around. It would be so much easier to just ghost him, to never have this conversation. But I'd spent 3 years taking the easy route, letting him dictate the terms of our relationship. Not anymore. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I reached his door, I paused, my hand hovering over the wood. This was it, the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I knocked twice, firm and clear. The door swung open almost immediately. Miles stood there with that smile, the one that used to make my knees weak, the one I'd memorized in 1,000 different moments. But tonight, it just made me sad. He looked good, like he always did, dark hair slightly messy, wearing that gray sweater I'd bought him last Christmas. He stepped aside to let me in. "George, I'm so glad you came. I was worried you'd cancel." His voice was warm, familiar, but it no longer reached the parts of me it used to. I walked past him into the living room, the space filled with memories I'd rather forget. The couch where we'd spent countless nights, the kitchen where he'd taught me to make his grandmother's pasta recipe, the window where we'd watched the sunrise together, promising each other things we never kept. I turned to face him and he moved closer, reaching for my hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. But I pulled back. His expression shifted, confusion flickering across his features. "What's wrong?" Everything was wrong. And it was about time I said it out loud. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 3 years pressing against my chest, and prepared to finally tell him the truth. "What's wrong?" Miles repeated, his voice dropping to that concerned tone he used whenever he sensed I was upset. But this time, I wasn't going to let him smooth things over with pretty words and empty promises. I stepped back, creating physical distance between us, and watched as his confusion deepened. "We need to talk," I said quietly. My voice was steady, which surprised me. I'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times in my head, and in every version I was crying or yelling, or falling apart. But standing here now, I felt strangely calm, clear. He gestured toward the couch. "Okay, let's sit down. Whatever it is, we can work through it." That phrase, "work through it," had been his go-to response for 3 years. Every argument, every moment of doubt, every time I questioned why we had to hide, he always believed we could work through it, as long as working through it meant I stayed quiet and waited. I didn't sit. I stayed standing, my arms crossed over my chest. "When you asked me to understand about Victoria, you told me it was temporary. You said it was just for appearances, just until your parents came around. You promised me that nothing would change between us." He nodded quickly, eagerly. "Nothing has changed, George. I still love you. Victoria and I, we're not." "You married her." The words came out sharper than I intended. "You stood in front of everyone you know and married her. You've been living with her for 2 months. How is that nothing?" Miles ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit I knew too well. "It's complicated. My father's health hasn't been great, and this marriage secured a major business partnership. I did this for my family's company, for our future. Once things stabilize." "Stop." I held up my hand. "Just stop. Do you hear yourself? Everything is always about your career, your family, your future. What about mine? Did you ever once ask what I wanted?" He looked genuinely confused, like this thought had never occurred to him. "I thought you understood. I thought we were on the same page." "The same page?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Miles, I haven't been on any page. I've been sitting in the margins, waiting for you to decide when I get to be part of the actual story." His jaw tightened. "That's not fair. I've always cared about you. You know how difficult my situation is." "Your situation is difficult because you made it difficult," I shot back. "You could have told your parents the truth. You could have stood up for us. But you didn't because it was easier not to. Because I was easier to hide than to fight for." He stepped closer, reaching for me again, desperation creeping into his expression. "George, please, don't do this. We can figure it out. I'll talk to my parents. I'll explain everything. You'll what?" I interrupted. "You'll leave Victoria? You'll blow up your entire life? We both know you won't." Silence fell between us, heavy and suffocating. He didn't deny it because he couldn't. We both knew the truth. I'd always been his secret, his escape, the person he came to when the pressure of his perfect life became too much. But I was never his choice, not the one that mattered. I took a deep breath and looked down at my left hand. The silver ring caught the light. For a moment I just stared at it, gathering courage. Then I looked back up at Miles. His eyes followed my gaze, landing on the ring. His entire body went rigid. "What is that?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said softly. "I met someone. His name is Nolan. And yesterday, he asked me to marry him." The color drained from Miles's face. He looked like I'd physically struck him. "You're joking." "I'm not." You can't be serious. You barely know him. How long has this been going on?" "Does it matter?" I asked. "You're married, Miles. You don't get to be upset about who I'm with." "But you love me." The words burst out of him, raw and desperate. "We've been together for 3 years. You can't just throw that away." I felt something crack inside my chest. Not breaking, but opening. Like a door I'd been holding shut finally swinging wide. "I'm not throwing it away. You already did that when you chose everyone else over me. When you decided your comfort was more important than my dignity." He shook his head violently. No. This isn't happening. Tell me you didn't say yes to him." "I did. George. Please." "He doesn't hide me," I said, my voice growing stronger. "When Nolan talks about his future, I'm in it. Not as a secret, not as a someday, but right now. He introduced me to his family. He tells his friends about me. He's proud to be with me. Can you say the same?" Miles opened his mouth, then closed it again. No words came, because we both knew the answer. I walked toward the door, my legs steadier than they'd been in months. When I reached for the handle, Miles found his voice again. "I love you. Doesn't that mean anything?" I turned back one last time. He looked broken, standing there in the middle of his secret apartment, surrounded by the ghost of what we used to be. Part of me ached for him, for the version of us that existed before reality set in. But that part was getting smaller. "Love isn't enough when it comes with conditions," I said quietly. "And yours always did." I opened the door and walked out. Behind me, I heard him call my name once, but I didn't stop. I took the stairs quickly, emerged into the cold night air, and kept walking until I reached my car. Only when I was safely inside did I let out the breath I'd been holding. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a strange mixture of grief and relief. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. For the first time in 3 years, I'd chosen myself. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Nolan. I told him, "It's really over." His response came within seconds. "How are you feeling?" I thought about it, searching for the right words. Finally I typed, "Free." As I drove home through the quiet streets, I realized I meant it. The weight I'd been carrying, the constant wondering, the endless waiting, the suffocating hope, all of it was gone. Miles had been my entire world for so long that I'd forgotten there was anything beyond him. But there was. There was a whole life waiting for me. One where I didn't have to hide or apologize or make myself smaller, and I was finally ready to live it. The apartment felt different when I got home. Lighter somehow, like the walls themselves were breathing easier. I dropped my keys on the counter and stood in the middle of my living room, letting the silence settle around me. It was past 9, but I didn't feel tired. My mind was racing, replaying the conversation with Miles, examining every word and expression. Had I been too harsh? Too cold? No. I'd been honest. Maybe for the first time since we'd gotten together. My phone buzzed. Nolan's name lit up the screen with a new message. "Want some company? No pressure. Just thought you might not want to be alone tonight." I smiled, my first real smile all day. This was different. Nolan didn't assume he knew what I needed. He offered, then gave me space to choose. I typed back, "Actually, yeah, that would be nice." 20 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Nolan stood there holding a paper bag. "I brought ice cream." Figured it was either going to be an ice cream night or a whiskey night, and I played it safe. I laughed and stepped aside to let him in. He moved through my space with easy confidence, finding bowls in my kitchen like he'd been there 100 times before. Even though this was only his second visit, he scooped out generous portions of chocolate chip mint, somehow my favorite, though I didn't remember telling him, and handed me one. We sat on opposite ends of my couch, and for a while we just ate in comfortable silence. No interrogation, no demands for details, just quiet companionship. Finally, Nolan set his bowl down and turned to face me properly. Do you want to talk about it? I considered the question. Part of me wanted to spill everything. The hurt, the anger, the tiny sliver of guilt I felt for walking away from 3 years of my life. But another part of me was tired of talking about Miles. Tired of giving him more space in my head than he deserved. He didn't take it well, I said simply. But it's done. Really done this time. Nolan nodded. How do you feel? Honestly, I'm not sure yet. It's like I've been holding my breath underwater for so long that I forgot what normal breathing feels like. Now that I'm on the surface, everything feels strange. That makes sense, he said. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. I set my own bowl aside and pulled my knees up to my chest. Can I ask you something? Why me? You could have anyone. Why did you choose someone who's clearly a mess? Nolan's expression softened. You're not a mess, George. You're someone who loved hard and got hurt. That's not the same thing. He shifted closer, closing the distance between us. And I chose you because when we talked that first night, you didn't pretend to be someone you're not. You were real. That's rare. His words settled over me like a warm blanket. I'd spent so long trying to be whoever Miles needed me to be. Patient, understanding, invisible when necessary. I'd forgotten what it felt like to just exist as myself. Tomorrow, Nolan continued, I want you to meet my family. My parents, my sister, maybe my brother if he's not traveling for work. I know it might feel fast, but I want you to see that this is real, that I'm serious about us. My stomach flipped. Your family? Already? Is that too much? He asked, concern creeping into his voice. I thought about it. With Miles, I'd waited 3 years for an introduction that never came. 3 years of holidays spent separately, of being cropped out of photos, of pretending I didn't exist in any meaningful way. And here was Nolan, offering me the exact opposite after barely a week. No, I said. It's not too much, it's just different from what I'm used to. Good different? Yeah, good different. He smiled, that warm, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Then he stood up and offered me his hand. Come on. You look exhausted. You should sleep. I let him pull me to my feet, suddenly aware of how tired I actually was. The emotional weight of the evening was catching up to me. Nolan walked me to my bedroom door, respecting the boundary without me having to ask. I'll text you in the morning with the details, he said. Lunch at my parents' place. Very casual, I promise. Okay. I hesitated, then added, thank you. For tonight. For not pushing. Always, he said simply. Then he left, locking the door behind him on his way out. I changed into sweats and crawled into bed, expecting to lie awake for hours replaying everything. But exhaustion pulled me under almost immediately. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my windows and the smell of coffee. Confused, I stumbled into the kitchen to find a thermos sitting on my counter with a note. Didn't want to wake you but figured you'd need this. See you at 1. He had a key? No, wait. I'd left my spare under the mat last night after he'd mentioned he might stop by with breakfast. The gesture was thoughtful without being intrusive. I poured the still hot coffee into a mug and checked my phone. It was already 11:30. I'd slept for over 12 hours. I had 90 minutes to get ready to meet Nolan's family. The thought sent nervous butterflies through my stomach. But they weren't the bad kind. They were the kind that came with anticipation, with possibility. I showered and dressed carefully, choosing a casual button-down and dark jeans. Nothing too formal, but put together enough to make a good impression. As I drove to the address Nolan had sent, I noticed the neighborhood getting progressively nicer. Large houses with manicured lawns, tree-lined streets that spoke of old money and established roots. His parents' house was a beautiful colonial-style home painted a soft gray with white trim. I parked and sat in my car for a moment, gathering courage. My phone buzzed. I see you out there. Come on in. They're excited to meet you. I looked up to see Nolan standing in the doorway, backlit by the warm light from inside. He was waving at me, grinning like I was the best thing he'd seen all day. Something in my chest loosened. I got out of the car and walked toward him, toward this new chapter, toward a future that didn't require me to hide. Ready? He asked when I reached the porch. I took a deep breath and nodded. Ready. He took my hand and led me inside, and for the first time in 3 years I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Meeting Nolan's family had opened a door I didn't know existed. Within a week we were planning a wedding. Not someday, not eventually, actually planning it. The speed should have terrified me, but instead it felt like finally stepping onto solid ground after years of treading water. We sat at his dining table with magazines, fabric swatches, and venue brochures spread between us. Nolan had his laptop open, scrolling through florists while I sketched rough layouts on a notepad. This was surreal. With Miles, I'd spent 3 years imagining a future that never materialized. Now, with Nolan, that future was taking shape in real time. What about this place? Nolan turned his screen toward me. A garden venue with stone pathways and arched trellises covered in climbing roses. String lights crisscrossed overhead in the photos, creating a canopy of soft gold light. It looked like something from a fairy tale. It's beautiful, I said, meaning it. But don't you want something bigger? More formal? He shook his head. I want something that feels like us. Intimate. Honest. This place holds maybe 75 people max. That's perfect. The way he said us made my chest warm. There was no hesitation, no calculation, just certainty. I pulled the laptop closer, studying the venue details. The price was reasonable, and they had an opening in 6 weeks. 6 weeks until I'd be married. The thought sent butterflies through my stomach. The good kind. Let's book it, I said. Nolan grinned and immediately pulled out his phone to call. While he handled the deposit, I continued browsing through flower options. White roses. Definitely. Maybe some eucalyptus for greenery. Something simple and classic. As I circled options with a pen, I realized I was smiling. Actually smiling while planning a wedding. Not crying or second-guessing or wondering if it would ever happen. Done, Nolan announced, setting his phone down. We're officially locked in for June 14th. Now let's talk about the guest list. We spent the next hour writing names, debating +1s, and laughing about which of his cousins would definitely cry during the ceremony. Every decision felt collaborative. Every time I suggested something, Nolan listened. Really listened. He'd tilt his head, consider it, then either agree or offer an alternative with actual reasoning behind it. Not once did he dismiss my opinion or override my choices. What about your side? He asked, pen poised over the list. Family? Close friends? I hesitated. My family was small, just my mom and my younger sister, both of whom lived across the country. We talked maybe once a month. They knew I'd been seeing someone but didn't know about Miles. Didn't know about the years I'd wasted. I'd kept that part of my life carefully separate. My mom and sister, I said. And maybe 3 friends from college. That's about it. Nolan didn't push for details, just nodded and wrote the names down. Small and meaningful. I like that. The afternoon melted into evening. We ordered takeout and continued planning, moving from logistics to the ceremony itself. Nolan wanted traditional vows but with a personal twist, something that reflected who we actually were. Not just recited promises. I agreed. We'd each write something from the heart. Around 9, as we were cleaning up the dinner containers, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and froze. Miles. The name alone sent a cold shock through my system. I hadn't heard from him in 2 weeks. Not since that night at his apartment. Part of me had hoped he'd accepted reality and moved on. The message was simple. Can we meet? There's something I need to tell you. Nolan noticed my expression change. Everything okay? I showed him the screen. His jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his voice neutral. You going to respond? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me thinks I should just block him and be done with it. But another part feels like I owe him at least a conversation. You don't owe him anything, Nolan said gently. But if you need closure, I understand. I thought about it for a moment, then typed back, fine. Tomorrow 2 p.m. Riverside Coffee. This is the last time. His response came immediately. Thank you. I'll be there. I set the phone down and looked at Nolan. I'm sorry. This isn't fair to you. Stop, he said, pulling me into a hug. You're allowed to have a past. You're allowed to deal with it however you need to. I trust you. Those words, I trust you, hit differently than anything Miles had ever said. Trust without conditions, without surveillance, without jealousy. Just pure simple trust. The next afternoon I arrived at Riverside Coffee 10 minutes early. I ordered an Americano and claimed a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. My hands were steadier than I expected. No trembling, no nausea, just a calm readiness to close this chapter permanently. Miles walked in at exactly 2. He looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't been sleeping well. He spotted me and made his way over, moving slowly like he was approaching something fragile. "George," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Thank you for agreeing to see me. You have 10 minutes, I replied, checking my watch. "Say what you need to say." He flinched at my tone but nodded. "I filed for divorce. It's official. Victoria and I are done." I waited for the surge of emotion, vindication, satisfaction, anything. Nothing came, just a vague sense of detachment, like he was telling me about a stranger's life. "Congratulations," I said flatly. "I told my parents everything," he continued, words tumbling out faster now. "About us, about why I couldn't make the marriage work, about how I've been in love with you this whole time. They were angry at first, but they're coming around. My father said he'd rather I be happy than miserable in a business arrangement." "That's great, Miles. Really. So we can be together now," he said, reaching across the table toward my hand. "Properly, publicly. Everything you wanted." I pulled my hand back before he could touch it. "Everything I wanted 3 years ago. Not anymore." His face crumbled. "Because of him? Because of Nolan? Because of me?" I corrected. "Because I finally realized I deserve better than being someone's backup plan. You didn't choose me when it mattered, Miles. You chose me when you had no other options left." "That's not true, isn't it?" I leaned forward. "If I hadn't met Nolan, if I'd still been waiting around for you, would you have left Victoria? Or would you have kept me as your secret until it became convenient?" Silence. The answer was written all over his face. "I'm getting married," I said quietly. "In 6 weeks. To someone who wanted me from day one. Someone who introduces me to his family, who plans a future with me in it, who doesn't need permission from anyone to love me openly." Tears welled in Miles' eyes. "I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But I genuinely love you." "Maybe you do," I acknowledged. "But love isn't enough when it comes wrapped in shame and secrecy. Nolan taught me that." I stood up, leaving my half-finished coffee on the table. Miles looked up at me, desperate and broken. And for the first time I felt nothing but pity. "I hope you find happiness," I said. "Real happiness. Not the kind built on other people's patience. But that happiness isn't with me. Not anymore." I walked out of the coffee shop into brilliant afternoon sunshine. My phone buzzed. Nolan checking in, asking how it went. I smiled and typed back, "It went perfectly. Coming home now," and I meant it. I was going home. To Nolan, to our future, to the life we were building together. Miles was finally truly in the past where he belonged. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, gentle breeze, temperatures hovering in the mid-70s. I woke up in my apartment for the last time as a single person, feeling surprisingly calm. No cold feet, no last-minute doubts, just quiet anticipation. Tyler, Nolan's younger brother, showed up at 8 with coffee and bagels. He'd volunteered to be my support system for the morning, claiming Nolan was too nervous to string together coherent sentences. We ate breakfast while Tyler told embarrassing childhood stories about his brother. The time Nolan tried to dye his own hair and turned it orange. The phase where he insisted on wearing a cape to school. The disastrous first date that ended with a minor fire. "He's a disaster," Tyler said fondly. "But he's genuinely happy with you. I haven't seen him like this in years." "Like what?" I asked. "Settled. Confident. Like he knows exactly where he belongs." Tyler paused, then added, "He told me about your ex. About how that guy treated you. For what it's worth, my brother would never do that. When Nolan commits, he's all in." The vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard. "Thank you. That means a lot." We finished eating and headed to the venue. The transformation was stunning. The garden space had been decorated with exactly the vision Nolan and I had discussed. White roses everywhere, eucalyptus garlands wrapped around the pillars, fairy lights strung overhead even though they wouldn't be lit until dusk. Rows of white chairs faced an arch covered in climbing flowers. It was intimate and perfect. Tyler helped me get ready in a small preparation room. My suit was charcoal gray, fitted but comfortable, with a crisp white shirt and a tie that matched the roses. As I adjusted my collar in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I looked happy, genuinely, deeply happy. Nervous? Tyler asked, echoing what felt like the question of the day. A little, I admitted. But it's good nervous. Like standing at the edge of something amazing. He smiled. That's exactly what Nolan said this morning. You two are perfect for each other. Kind of disgustingly so, actually. I laughed, and the sound echoed around the small room. When was the last time I'd laughed this easily? Without calculating whether it was too loud, too much, too revealing. A soft knock interrupted us. My sister Emma poked her head in. Can I come in? Of course. She entered, looking elegant in a navy dress, her hair swept up. We hadn't been particularly close growing up. 6 years between us meant we'd lived almost separate childhoods. But seeing her here meant everything. You look good, she said, adjusting my tie even though it was already straight. Really good. Happy. I am. Mom's already crying, by the way. She started the moment she saw the flowers. Emma paused, then added more softly, I'm glad you found someone who treats you right. I know we don't talk about everything, but I knew you were hurting for a while. It's good to see that gone. My throat tightened. Thanks, Em. She hugged me quickly, then pulled back with a watery smile. Okay, enough emotions. Let's get you married. The ceremony was scheduled for 4. At 3:45, Tyler led me to the entrance of the garden aisle. Guests were already seated. Maybe 60 people total. A perfect intimate gathering. I recognized Nolan's parents in the front row, his mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. My mom sat across from them, already crying as predicted. Then the music started. A string quartet we'd hired began playing, and everyone stood. My heart hammered against my ribs as I walked down the aisle alone, feeling dozens of eyes on me but searching for only one person. Nolan stood at the altar in a black suit, and the expression on his face when he saw me was something I'd remember forever. Pure joy mixed with awe, like he couldn't quite believe this was happening. I reached the front, and he extended his hand. I took it, and immediately everything else faded into background noise. The officiant, a friend of Nolan's family, began speaking about love and commitment. But I was barely listening. I was too focused on Nolan's face, on the way his thumb traced small circles on the back of my hand, on the reality that this was actually happening. Nolan, your vows, the officiant prompted. Nolan cleared his throat, his voice slightly unsteady. George, I promise to never make you feel like your second choice. You're my only choice. From the moment we met, I knew there was one different about you, something real and honest that I'd been searching for without knowing it. I promise to always see you, to always hear you, to always choose you. In public, in private, in easy times and hard ones. You're it for me. My vision blurred. I blinked rapidly, trying to keep the tears at bay long enough to say my own vows. Nolan, I began, my voice shaking more than I'd anticipated. You showed me what it means to be loved without conditions. You taught me that I don't have to shrink myself to fit into someone else's life because you made room for all of me in yours. I promise to build a life with you that's honest and open and full of all the small moments that make everything worthwhile. Thank you for choosing me. I'll spend every day choosing you back. The officiant smiled. The rings? Tyler stepped forward with both bands. Nolan took mine first, sliding it onto my finger with steady hands. With this ring, I choose you. I took his ring, my hands trembling slightly as I slipped it onto his finger. With this ring, I choose you. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you married. You may kiss. Nolan's hands came up to cup my face and he kissed me softly at first, then deeper as applause erupted around us. When we finally pulled apart, he was grinning like a fool, and I knew I was mirroring the expression. We walked back down the aisle together as the quartet played something upbeat and joyful. At the end of the aisle, Nolan pulled me aside briefly. How do you feel? Like I can finally breathe. The reception flowed seamlessly into evening. Dinner was served at long tables decorated with candles and more roses. Speeches were given. Tyler told more embarrassing stories. Emma surprised me with a genuinely touching toast. And Nolan's father spoke about the importance of finding someone who brings out your best self. As twilight fell, the fairy lights came on, transforming the space into something magical. Nolan pulled me onto the makeshift dance floor. I should warn you, I'm terrible at this. Good thing I don't care. We swayed together, ignoring the rhythm of the music, just holding each other. Over his shoulder, I caught movement near the garden entrance. A figure standing in the shadows, watching. My heart recognized him before my mind did. Miles. He stood there for maybe 30 seconds, face partially obscured by the gathering darkness. Our eyes met across the space. I saw everything in that brief moment: regret, loss, acceptance. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Nolan felt me tense. What's wrong? Nothing, I said and meant it. Absolutely nothing. I pulled him closer and kept dancing, letting the past fade into nothing while the future sparkled overhead like 1,000 tiny stars. We spent our honeymoon in a small coastal town 3 hours north, renting a cottage with a view of the ocean. For 5 days we did nothing but exist together: morning walks on the beach, afternoons reading on the porch, evenings cooking dinners that were more laughter than actual food. It was the kind of simple, unhurried time I'd never experienced before. With Miles, every moment had been stolen or scheduled around his other obligations. With Nolan, time just unfolded naturally. Returning to real life felt surprisingly easy. We'd decided to move into Nolan's place since it was bigger than my apartment. The transition happened gradually over 2 weeks, boxes slowly migrating from one home to another. My books filling empty shelves, my coffee mugs mixing with his in the kitchen cabinet. One evening about 3 weeks after the wedding, I stood in our bedroom unpacking the last box when I found something tucked at the bottom. A photo from 4 years ago. Miles and me at some work event, standing carefully apart like we always did in public. He was looking at the camera, but I was looking at him with an expression that made my chest ache. Not because I missed him, but because I could see how much of myself I'd sacrificed trying to love someone who wouldn't love me back the same way. What's that? Nolan appeared in the doorway, towel drying his hair from a shower. I held up the photo. Ancient history. He crossed the room and looked at it over my shoulder. You look sad in this? I just didn't know it yet. What do you want to do with it? I studied the photo for another moment, then walked to the kitchen and dropped it in the recycling bin. Not dramatically, not ceremonially, just disposing of something that no longer served a purpose. There, I said, returning to the bedroom. Done. Nolan pulled me into a hug. Proud of you. Life settled into a rhythm. Nolan left for his architecture firm around 7 each morning while I worked from our home office, designing websites for various clients. We'd text throughout the day, random thoughts, funny observations, countdown messages to when he'd be home. Around 6 he'd return and we'd cook dinner together, trading stories about our respective days. It was mundane in the best possible way. No drama, no secrets, no waiting for the other shoe to drop. Just 2 people building a life one ordinary day at a time. About a month into married life, I was at the grocery store debating between pasta brands when I saw him. Miles, standing in the produce section examining avocados like they held the secrets of the universe. He looked thinner than at the wedding, worn down in a way that went beyond physical appearance. For a moment, I considered turning around and leaving through another aisle. But something stopped me, not longing, not curiosity, just a strange sense of completion. I pushed my cart forward. He looked up as I approached and recognition flickered across his face. George. Miles. Silence stretched between us. Up close I could see more details, the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes that hadn't been there before, the way his hands trembled slightly as he set down the avocado. How have you been? He asked finally. Good. Really good, actually. I saw you at the wedding. His voice was quiet. You looked happy. I was. I am. He nodded, looking down at his shoes. I handled everything wrong. With us. With Victoria. With my life in general. I know that now. Too late. But I know. I hope you figure things out, I said, and realized I meant it. Not from a place of superiority or revenge, but genuine hope that he'd find whatever he was looking for. I don't deserve your kindness. Probably not. I agreed. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. Holding on to anger would just be another way of letting you take up space in my life. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You've really moved on. Yeah, I really have. We stood there for another awkward moment before Miles extended his hand. I'm glad you're happy, George. Genuinely. I shook it briefly. Take care of yourself, Miles. Then I walked away, continuing my shopping like we'd just been two strangers making small talk. Because in a way we were. The person I'd been with him felt like a different life, a different version of myself that I'd outgrown. I finished shopping and drove home, where Nolan was already in the kitchen attempting to marinate chicken. He looked up when I entered, flowers somehow on his cheek despite no recipe requiring flour. How do you even? I gestured at his face. It's a gift, he said seriously, then grinned. How was the store? Interesting, actually. I ran into Miles. Nolan's hands stilled. Oh? Yeah. We talked for maybe 2 minutes. It was fine. Better than fine, actually. It was just closure. How do you feel about it? I thought about the question as I unpacked groceries. How did I feel? Lighter. Freer. Like the last thread connecting me to that painful chapter had finally been cut. Relieved, I said. And grateful. Because seeing him reminded me how different everything is now. How much better. Nolan abandoned the chicken and crossed to where I stood by the refrigerator. His arms wrapped around me from behind, chin resting on my shoulder. I love you. I love you too. We stayed like that for a moment, comfortable in the silence. Through the kitchen window, I could see our small backyard with the herb garden we'd planted last weekend. Beyond that, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Hey, Nolan said suddenly. Remember when we first met and I asked you to marry me after like 3 days? You mean your smoothest move ever? Exactly that one. Do you ever regret saying yes so quickly? I turned in his arms to face him properly. Not once. Not for a single second. Good, because I just burned the chicken. Smoke was indeed rising from the stove. We both lunged for it, dissolving into laughter as Nolan insisted he'd meant to make it extra crispy while I opened windows to clear the smoke. We ended up ordering pizza instead, eating it on the couch while watching a terrible reality show and making fun of every ridiculous moment. Later that night, lying in bed with Nolan's arm draped across my waist, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. 3 years with Miles, spent hiding and hoping and slowly losing pieces of myself. Then Nolan, who'd appeared like some kind of miracle and reminded me what it felt like to be chosen. You awake? Nolan whispered in the darkness. Yeah, just wanted to say thank you for taking a chance on me, on us. I know it was fast and probably crazy. It was perfect, I interrupted. It is perfect. You're perfect. I'm really not, he laughed softly. But I'm perfect for you, and that's what matters. He was right. He wasn't perfect. He burned dinner, left wet towels on the floor and snored like a freight train. But he was perfect for me in all the ways that actually counted. He saw me, heard me, chose me every single day without hesitation or reservation. Forever? I asked, echoing our wedding vows. Forever, he confirmed, pulling me closer. And lying there in the darkness of our shared bedroom in the home we'd built together, I finally understood what real love felt like. Not the desperate, clinging kind I'd mistaken for love with Miles, but the steady, sure kind that didn't need grand gestures because it was woven into every ordinary moment. This was home. This was happiness. This was everything I'd been searching for without knowing how to find it. And I'd never been more grateful to be exactly where I was.